again, we just don't know how many there
That's
really
right.
are.
They haven't closed you down?
They have not. No, the schools are closed. My son has been home from school all week, so he and I have been studying together, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. Here in Las Vegas, everything is closed.
Yeah, really.
Hotels, casinos, restaurants,
Yeah.
all businesses are closed.
Our restaurants are closed in that people can't go and sit in them, but they can
they have
take
takeout.
takeout.
Ours allow takeout also.
Yeah.
The only things that are open.
They can't treat the COVID itself anyway yet.
Right.
So doing testing just identifies whether you have it. They're going to treat you the same way that they treat flu and other respiratory illnesses. They don't have a special treatment for COVID. So
Right.
follow the precautions, wipe everything down, don't get a whole lot of social contact.
Right.
And if you get sick, just isolate yourself.
Right.
Probably don't even need to go to the doctor unless you start getting a really, really high fever or you start really, really having trouble breathing.
Yeah.
So, it'll pass eventually. And
Well, my wife's an ICU nurse, and it's a little bit riskier than that.
oh, well,
You start coughing or you start running any kind of fever or anything like that, you better get to a hospital or a doctor really fast.
right. But a lot of hospitals won't even take you until you reach certain criteria.
Yeah, well, it depends on how many beds they have.
I
Yeah,
know.
right.
I know. So what do y'all want to do for Finance 500 this morning? Y'all got any questions?
I don't know. I keep going over the math stuff, and
You feel good about the other stuff, though.
I'm doing a little bit better. I haven't even tried to look at the other stuff.
Well, no, you need to look at the other stuff. Okay.
Okay.
And this is a concern that I have based on some of the questions that I'm seeing. Some people are asking where these questions are going to come from. And guys, everything, the answers to the questions, all that kind of stuff is right here in this reading document.
Yeah.
So before you take your test on Monday or Tuesday or whenever you take it, you need to feel like you understand conceptually all the stuff that's in this document.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you basic questions about what this document says. Finance is not math. This is not a math class.
Thank goodness.
This is a class about decision making. And the majority of the questions on the exams you're going to take are not math questions. So
Okay.
don't over focus on the math.
Oh, okay.
Even if there's a math that you don't know how to do and you miss it, you're still going to do okay on the test if you know everything else.
Okay. That helps.
Good.
So hello, am I there?
I can hear you.
So,
Okay, so are we getting any math questions in the exam?
Yes, there will be some math on this test, but
Okay.
the majority of the questions over the course of the term are not going to be math questions. Finance is about decision making. And the
Right.
decision making, the way we look at it, is based on value. And value happens to be a number. But just calculating a number doesn't help you make a decision. It's
Right.
using numbers to make decisions. So conceptually, the math is a minor part of finance. I know it's a lot more than management, but it's, this is a social science about decision making.
so we should expect to see
Right.
more questions like number 6 and number 12 than or on the practice.
No.
Six is the one asking about
You should expect
assets.
to see more questions about what does investment as a class cover? What does financial markets and institutions cover? What is financial management? What's the goal of the firm? Explain what risk means. All the kind of things that are in this document.
Okay.
Read
Oh,
through
thank
this
goodness.
and
Okay.
take everything in this document and make sure you feel like you understand it well enough that you can put it in your own words.
Okay.
Okay.
That's how you do this class.
Okay.
And the tests are open book, right?
Yeah, you can use whatever resources you want. Just use your own words.
Okay.
I get, okay. Boy, that's a lot clearer. Thank you.
Okay.
So when we take the test, are we simply going to be typing out our answers onto the test, or are there going to be certain situations where, like, that are math questions where you would like to see our work, but we're actually doing that on a piece of paper on the side?
There will be some pure calculation items that could come up on your exam, okay? If that happens, put your answer first, finish the exam, and then use any extra time you have to show work. Showing work only matters if you don't get the right number for the answer.
Right.
That's the only time showing work matters, so that I can make a judgment about how much partial credit you get.
Okay.
Okay.
But like I say, the people who are not successful in Finance 500 are the people who obviously didn't do anything. If you do something, you're probably going to be okay in Finance 500. My hope is that the vast majority of people realize you're not taking Finance 500 for a grade. You're taking Finance 500 to give you a better chance when you take the real classes.
Right.
The classes that you have to take. This is voluntary.
Right.
So it's just helping us understand, what is ahead.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now, on the practice questions, or generally, can you please explain variance again? I wanted to state. I want to hear it from you, like a story. I wanted to state because that is how I study.
All right. The only reason that we care about variance is because we know that uncertainty affects the way people value things. Okay, so risk is the chance that something is going to turn out differently than we think it will. People don't like that. They're risk averse. They try to avoid uncertainty.
Okay.
So whenever you're looking at future benefits from a decision, you want to have an idea about how sure you are that your expectations are likely to come true. The less sure you are, the more risky it is, and the lower the value of those future benefits is going to be to you. So if I'm buying a share of stock and I think it's going to pay me these dividends forever into the future, I want to know what those dividends are worth now. Okay, and in the second module, we're going to use techniques that allow us to find out what future benefits are worth, but part of the value is coming from the risk. So the only thing that we're doing related to that, other than conceptually, here in this first section, is we're saying, well, look, statisticians have this great way for us to talk about risk. They use this tool that's called variance. And it's a number. And we eventually are going to need a number for risk because we have to turn it into a number we can use to find the value of things. So in statistics, and I'm going to apologize, I'm terrible at the whiteboard. I cannot draw a straight line. All right. I got a probability on this axis. And I've
Right.
got a value in this axis, and I'm just going to go ahead, even though this is not until the next module, I'm going to say that the value is the expected return that we're going to get from some kind of savings or investment. All right.
Yeah.
Now, the most likely outcome, the outcome that has the highest probability of occurring, that's called the mean.
Mhm.
But the variance tells us about how likely all these other outcomes are. The wider the spread, the more risk there is. So the lower the value, the lower the less interested we are in getting this future benefit that we're talking about. So I've drawn a terrible probability distribution here, but variance just says how spread out is that thing. I'm going to draw another terrible probability distribution. Can you see the difference between those?
Mhm.
This
Yes.
one is not spread out at all. It has very low dispersion. This has very high dispersion. So this first probability distribution that I drew, that's showing us something that's a lot less risky. So we would rather have our outcomes with this skinny rather than this fat distribution. The fat distribution is going to have a much bigger variance than the skinny distribution. So that's what variance is for, is to tell us how much risk there is in something. To calculate it is pretty easy, especially if I can get my mouse to work. Hey, Jeb.
What's up?
To calculate variance is
So
just
I'm sorry, are we considering risk and variance to be the same thing?
the way
Exactly.
finance people define risk, the chance that something is going to turn out differently than we thought it would.
Yeah,
Variance is a pretty good measure.
okay,
All right.
yeah,
So there's a process for the variance. You're going to a probability distribution. You're taking the probability of a particular outcome, you're multiplying it times the value of that outcome, and I'll go ahead and stay using return as our variable that we're interested in. You do that for all the possible outcomes. P times R, there's going to be another P times R. You just find the product of those two things. And you add those up, and that gives you the expected value, that central point of that probability distribution. Once you know the expected value, then you see how different is that value from the most likely outcome. So there's a deviation. I don't care if it's higher or lower than the expected return. So I square it because that'll take away the sign. And then I say, how likely is that outcome? That's our probability again. And then when I do this calculation for all of the possible outcomes, I add them up, and that's the variance.
Oh, okay.
And then I take the square root of it to get us back to the original units of measurement. In this case, expected return is a %, so that it makes more sense if you're trying to interpret exactly what the standard deviation means. Most of the time in finance, we don't care exactly what variance and standard deviation means. We're using variance and standard deviation to say, oh, look, this has more risk, therefore it should be less valuable. And in the second set of material, we're going to find a different way to think about risk that still is coming from statistics, but very rarely do you see somebody using standard deviation in an extremely meaningful way beyond understanding that it tells us about risk. Does that help, Ms. Thelma?
Yes, sir.
Find the expected return, subtract the expected return from each possible outcome, square that deviation, multiply it times the probability of each of those possible outcomes, and then add them all up. That's your variance.
Okay.
It's an F.
Most
I
of the
think-
people that send me
Mm.
emails and say, oh, variance is so hard, I'm not getting it right. Well, the reason they weren't getting it right is because they were just making a math error at some point in all those calculations.
That's
Right.
exactly what happened to me yesterday. I spent
Yeah.
hours on this and I finally
Mhm.
stuck it in an Excel spreadsheet and saw that I'd made some arithmetic errors and and it was all clear after that.
Well, I'm going to get philosophical again. You should not have any class that you ever take where a single item is taking you hours and hours.
Okay.
If you're faced with some kind of a question and it's not asking you to write a 20-page term paper, if you know that you're just looking for a number or you're just looking for a couple of sentences, if you can't get it done in 10 minutes, you just need to stop and ask a question.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah,
Don't
because I
spend
had
hours
to.
doing anything.
I did. I spent quite a bit of time puzzling it out yesterday. So, but now
Yeah.
I think I've got it down and it all makes sense to me. So I don't know, maybe I just needed to do that. But no, I wasn't sure if if it would just take longer to reach out and get an answer. So that's why I just stuck it out and got through it. So
Good. Melanie B, a good question in the chat.
yeah, I know, but she used a slightly different method than you used on your paper,
no.
and so it confused me more than anything. So
No, I'm not talking about the form. I'm talking about just now in chat. She's
Oh.
asking me about covariance. All right, so let's look up here. Somebody needs to turn their mic down because I'm hearing myself and I hate that. You guys are the only ones that should be forced to have to listen to it. All right, so there's variance, right?
Mhm.
If I were to do some math simplification, or actually it's math complication, that's the same thing as saying sum of P times R minus ER times R minus ER.
Mhm.
All right. So I'm comparing an outcome to the mean twice. Covariance is the same thing. It's the sum of the P times the R minus the ER times the R of something else. Not the same R that we used the first time, but the R of something else. So we can call this, let's call this one R1, and let's call this one R2.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is that supposed to be a minus sign between the R1 and the ER?
Yeah.
Okay.
So variance is really just items, variance.
Are you learning?
Sorry, variance is an item's covariance with itself. And actually, even though we're not going to talk about it a lot, Melanie, what we're going to do in the second set of material depends on covariance. So after we start looking at the second set of material, we can talk about covariance a little bit more. But variance is just a special case of covariance.
Now we know who all the other
Can
players
you
are.
hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So with covariance, what I understand is it just looks at those two variables and are they varying positively together? Or are they varying in opposite directions? Do I need to understand
well,
more than that?
But there is a magnitude that you need to consider with covariance. One of the things that we're going to do instead of covariance is correlation. correlation and covariance are related to each other. So
Right, because correlation would measure more of the strength of the relationship, like how much they're inversely moving
so
away
does
or towards each other.
so does covariance.
Okay, that part I don't understand yet then.
All right. Well, you don't need it for this class.
Great.
You don't need it for this class. Where did I write covariance in the reading guide?
No.
No. Well, then I don't know where I grabbed it from. Let me find it.
Could you go
That's
back
all
to
right.
the,
Don't worry about it.
could you
Go
go
ahead,
back to
DJ.
the, I'm sorry, could you go back to the formula for variance?
It is in the reading guide. I just did a word search.
All right.
Linear regression and ordinary least squares are also mentioned, but more just a mention. So if we need to know those, that would be great to elaborate on too.
Yeah, no, you don't need to worry about that yet, Melanie. It's going to become more important later. But the relationship between standard deviation and variance is very, very similar to the relationship between correlation and covariance. You're standardizing units of measurement. Jeb, are you within hearing distance?
Yeah. Hey.
Jeb is an undergraduate student of mine who's actually taken a class much harder than you guys are. Were you coming in just to listen, Jeb, or did you have a specific question?
Oh no, you had a Zoom session scheduled for us, I thought, at 11.
This is it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Were you coming to listen, or did you have something specific you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I wasn't sure. I mean, I guess I was just, I thought we were gonna just talk about 420, but looks like you.
No, mostly what I do in these Zoom sessions is I just answer questions.
Oh, okay. Don't really have any questions, I guess.
All right. Well, hang out, and if you think of one, ask it.
Okay. Let's see.
Anybody got a Finance 500 question?
Can we go over problems 5 and 6 on the practice guide?
5 and 6. Yes, we can. All right. Finance 500 practice, problem number 5. Okay, I give you taxable income. I tell you what the tax rate is. How much money will you have? All right, this is a very common calculation in finance and in accounting. All right, so if my taxable income is this much, then I can find out how much tax I'm going to pay by taking the tax rate and multiplying it times the taxable income. So that's the tax. And then I could say, how much do I have left after taxes? Well, I got 45,623 minus whatever the taxes are.
Okay.
All right. Now, we can make that simpler using our friend math. We can simplify this. You'll notice that I got two terms. I got two terms in this mathematical expression. Y'all are seeing my paper, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, you got two terms in this mathematical expression, and each of those terms has a component in common. So I can factor that out. If I factor the 45,000 out of the first part, it leaves a 1. If I factor the 45,000 out of the second point, it leaves 34. So if I turn that into just variables instead of numbers, I got some kind of a pre-tax number, and I can multiply it times 1 minus the tax rate to turn it into an after-tax number. And like mathematicians, typically do, they show you this in one of those chapters from that math book that I got y'all to look at, but they don't really say it in the easiest way possible. They say it like mathematicians. Yeah. So you're just taking some kind of a pre-tax number. It can be an income, it can be a rate of return, it could be a lot of things. And then you can just see, well, here's what is going to be left after I have to pay taxes.
Thank you. Okay.
Sure enough.
Could you show the formula for the covariance once more?
You don't need it, Barry.
Okay.
Forget that Melanie ever brought it up.
Thank you.
I'm not going to make you calculate covariance. And also, Barry, anything that I show you on this screen, you can always go look at the recording later.
Right.
And pause it as you wish. All right, I got total assets here. 187,000. That's the left-hand side of the balance sheet. That's the investing decision that the document talks about. Now, I have to have money coming from somewhere to support each dollar of those assets. Where the money's coming from to support those, that's the financing decision. And here in this question, I tell you that, well, we're getting some of it with short-term liabilities, current liabilities. We got some from long-term debt, and we got some from the owners, the equity. So I just want you to find out the percentage of each of the different sources of financing. So how much is coming from current liabilities? Take the total, divide it into the particular source. That will give you the percentage. So all we're doing with percentages is we're standardizing everything to 100 or 1, depending on how you want to look at it and how many decimals you want to use. How much is coming from long-term debt? Well, there's the long-term debt. Here's the total. That would be the percentage that's long-term debt. And then finally, and once again, they do percentages. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm so dumb that when I think about something, I think about it in the simplest possible terms, and maybe that's why some people think I'm a good teacher. I don't know. But when I was a graduate assistant teaching at the University of Tennessee, my students called me the word man. They just said I used words that made it easy to understand. And I think that's because basically I'm a low intelligence individual.
Find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
What else y'all want to do?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Could you go over just number 13 on the practice one again, that slope formula? I think I understand it, but if you could just quickly go over it just to make sure it's right in my head, that would help.
Sure. And this one, you don't even really have to do any math. All right. When you're thinking about a straight line with two variables, X and Y, you're just looking at something like that. Y is equal to N times X plus B. And the slope is always the M, and the intercept is always the B. Now, when we start talking about covariance without really talking about it, we're going to end up with an equation later that's going to be a straight line, and we're going to care more about slope and intercept then.
Okay.
What else y'all want to do? And Jeb, jump right in there whenever you're ready.
All right.
You're a full-time participant.
Yeah. So I'm looking at, you have on the notes here something about the different types of balance sheets that financial institutions have. So I was wondering if you could kind of go over what the differences in balance sheets for different financial institutions would be.
Well, if we're trying to identify what type of financial institution it is, that's where we would go. It doesn't matter what they call themselves. Their financial statements are going to say, you know, which of these different financial services are they providing in what different levels. So one of the categories is depository institutions. Guess what makes them depository institutions? They use more deposits as a source of financing than other kinds of FI do.
Right.
It also happens that their biggest asset is loans. So I'm just looking at their balance sheets or their income statements, and I'm saying, you know, what makes this balance sheet different from these other balance sheets? So an insurance company, they're going to be unique because their main source of financing is going to be the premiums on those insurance policies.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right.
And what about mutual funds?
Mutual funds are holding as an asset just a big ass portfolio of financial claims. Whoa. And of stocks and bonds and other kinds of financial assets. And how do they finance it? Well, they issue these things that are called shares.
Mm-hmm.
Not shares of stock like Exxon has.
Shares of a portfolio.
Mutual fund where they're just taking that portfolio and they're just slicing it up into little bitty pieces and selling you part of it.
So that would be like.
I don't remember how big this is for the first test, but that's where intermediation comes in.
Denomination.
Intermediation is taking one kind of asset and turning it into what to the owners of this mutual fund is a different kind of asset.
Right.
We're creating a new financial claim to facilitate investment in a direct financial claim, which is what a share of stock is.
I gotcha. Is there going to be anything on the test about like the return on equity? You know, like are we going to have to solve, you know, determine value?
It would be fair game for me to make you calculate some ratios, but just like whenever we did it in Finance 301, I think calculating ratios is important because it helps some people understand what the ratio means. But the important thing about ratios is interpreting it. And I can guarantee you, you will at least have to interpret some ratios.
Right. Okay.
So go back and read my story about Bank of America. Look at what I say. Go see if you can see which ratio is telling us that.
Okay.
Wait, what story about Bank of America?
This is in a different class. This is in 420.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thank God.
Jeb is taking a senior level finance class.
Ah, okay.
So we don't have to worry about that one, right?
I wouldn't worry about any of this, Barry. I mean, hell, man, you live in Las Vegas.
Yeah, but everything's
What
closed.
could be better than that? Why worry about anything, you know?
It's very strange. It's very strange going into the Strip and seeing nobody there.
I bet.
That's.
You know,
What
she
else?
was right. There is a section here at the end about covariance, and I just I think I didn't get that far. So I guess I'm going to need to spend a little time looking at that potentially.
I think you should spend time looking at the whole document.
I have been over most of it. I just somehow I must have gotten so hung up on the section before that I didn't get to that. So I will have a look at that this evening.
Okay, so we can measure the risk of individual investments with variance and standard deviation. But what we observe in the real world is that people don't specialize in their investing. They don't take all of their savings and put it into just one thing. They spread their money around in a whole bunch of different assets. So when Jeb was asking about a mutual fund balance sheet, that's what we're talking about. A mutual fund is just a big portfolio that's created so that the risk of individual assets is minimized because it's offset by the risk of other assets.
Mhm.
All right, so that's why people form portfolios. We're going to do it later, and we're going to start using a different risk measure than variance because we have to account for diversification. Covariance is just a way that we can start to account for diversification. Covariance and correlation. So
Okay.
I probably, if I was looking at this paragraph and I was asking a question, I would say something like, why do people form portfolios? What does covariance tell us in general? One sentence answers. I'm not going to ask you to calculate covariance.
Okay.
Even in Finance 701, I don't ask people to calculate covariance.
Okay.
But we use a risk measure that depends on covariance. We pretty much just jump straight into the risk measure. Jeb, what risk measure do you think we're talking about?
Oh, I was tuning out a little bit, sorry.
That's the worst excuse I ever heard.
Oh, can you give me an example of off-balance sheet activity?
Sure. Let's say that Jeb has decided to go into the business of making COVID-19 masks, and he decides that he's going to make them out of wool. So he's going to make a deal with a sheep farmer in Idaho that the sheep farmer is going to send him all kinds of wool. But the sheep farmer had never heard of Jeb before. He doesn't know if he can wait, if he can go ahead and send the wool, or if he needs to wait till Jeb sends him some money. And you know how sheep farmers are. Jeb doesn't want to just send money to the sheep farmer before he gets his wool. So a financial institution can help this. The financial institution will send a letter to the sheep farmer that says, hey, Jeb is good for it, and if he doesn't pay you, I will. And they send that letter to the sheep farmer. The sheep farmer takes it to his bank. And so that creates an off-balance sheet activity. Your bank hasn't loaned you any money, Jeb, but what they've done is they've said, if Jeb doesn't pay you, I will.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a contingent liability that might occur in the future. And so that would be off the balance sheet.
Okay.
We're going to talk a lot about futures and other derivatives later in your course, Jeb, and those would be off balance sheet.
Derivatives would be off balance sheet?
Yes. Okay. Derivatives are off balance sheet.
That's like options and swaps and that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. All right. What else y'all want to do? Brittany, you like porcelain, don't you?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. Yeah, pretty nice, right? It's my mom's, it's not mine.
The way I have this set up, guys, is that y'all are all muted. And then whenever there's a noise, the program automatically unmutes you. So you don't have to turn your mic on. You can probably just talk and your mic will turn on for you. That's the wonderment of Zoom. Or you don't have to talk at all. You can just say, Yeah, Vines, let's talk about finance. Let's don't talk about my shelf of porcelain. What else do y'all want to do today?
Well, I think I'm all set now.
There's another webinar tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah,
Now, what will that cover?
whatever y'all ask me.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's just a third way to ask questions. You can ask
Super.
me questions through email. You can ask me questions through discussion forum. You can come to these and ask questions. You can watch these after they're recorded to see what other people are asking. If there was something specifically that I wanted to say to you guys, I would have created a document and created a video about it.
Okay.
So I don't come to these with some kind of agenda other than if it's something that I notice a lot of people are asking about, et cetera.
Okay.
Anybody else got some questions? I guess I permanently muted you, Jeb. I'm sorry. Try again.
Sorry. Liquidity risk. You have it just as the chance that cash inflows and outflows don't match up, but
Right.
it doesn't really describe liquidity to me very well.
Yeah. Okay. And you had asked this question, or
Right.
somebody did. Let's do some terrible whiteboard work again. I'm going to try to clear all drawing. Look at that. All right, so here's a balance sheet. And whenever a business student first learns about liquidity, they say it's how easy can you convert something to cash? And that is what liquidity is. The reason that liquidity risk is so important for financial institutions is because they have a whole glob of financial assets as their assets. I mean, if you look at an insurance company or a bank, you know, they got a small percentage that's buildings and machines, but most of their assets are financial claims. So just like we did in 301, we can think about each of those financial claims that this insurance company has invested in. You know, they got some cash, which is the most liquid. They got these short-term debt that they're buying from different people, from the government and from commercial institutions and from other banks and stuff like that. And then they got some long-term bonds. So we could think about the liquidity of each of those things individually. But one of the things that makes a financial institution unique is that they also have a whole bunch of financial claims as part of their financing decision. So they're borrowing some money short term, they're borrowing some money long term, they're taking money from their shareholders, and all of these things have different liquidity. So the thing that makes a financial institution unique, and the thing that makes liquidity risk so important, is that the liquidity of these things collectively is probably going to be different than the liquidity of their financing things. Mm-hmm. And if I've got a big mismatch of the liquidity of my assets and the liquidity of my liabilities, then I'm looking at possible bankruptcy just from some kind of a minor disruption. I mean, think about State Farm. Even though I know they're not for profit, they've got this big portfolio of stocks and bonds. That's their asset. And those things have a long liquidity. They also sell a lot of property casualty insurance. That's one of their sources of financing. And those things have a very short liquidity. So they're taking money in a very liquid way from customers, and they're turning it into a portfolio of assets that has a lot less liquidity. They're mismatched. Mm-hmm. Mismatching liquidity can cause you to have big trouble.
Gotcha.
right? So
Okay.
when am I getting cash flows from my assets? That's part of what liquidity is. When do I have to pay those cash flows on my liabilities? That's the other part of what liquidity is. So liquidity risk is the chance that there are going to be mismatch and something bad might happen and I can't pay things that I'm supposed to pay, or I have too much cash inflow. And we're going to have a whole chapter later that talks about measuring that and managing that.
Okay.
Does that help some?
Yeah, it does.
Good.
Let's see. Let's see.
Barry, can you move your camera a little bit so I can see the picture behind your head?
There we go.
That's not
those are-
Leroy Neiman, is it?
No, it's a watercolor of Maasai warriors done in Africa, in Kenya.
Cool. Thanks.
It is. It is.
What else you guys want to do? Iron Man is not really a superhero. I guess Dawn is not letting the kid hear what I'm saying. I was trying to insult her shirt. I like to pick on kids. What else y'all want to do?
Well, we've done a lot, and I'm glad you clarified what the
Good.
thrust of what it is that we're doing.
Good, good, good.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Finance means never having to say thank you or I'm sorry. We just do stuff in finance.
What a cutie.
Thank you.
Yep.
Who's on there? Is that what's that guy's name? Werewolf. It's not werewolf. It's is that Thor on there with Iron Man? Let me see your shirt. Yeah, that's Thor and Iron Man and the Hulk. Is this the Fantastic Four? Is that what they're called?
No.
What
they're
are they
the
called?
Avengers.
The Avengers. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thor, Iron Man, Black Panther, Vision, Captain America, Ant-Man, Wasp,
Don't forget Hulk.
Hulk,
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Who's your favorite?
Thor.
Okay.
My favorite too.
I really like him. Like, actually like him. My second favorite is Spider-Man.
It's a good choice too.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you guys want to do?
I think I'm all set. If I think of anything, I'll be back on tomorrow.
All right. Look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
S. Burris, you got any questions? Christine, I don't remember if you said anything or not. I heard Thelma ask some things.
There's other people there.
All right. Let me wait till I see Jeb's face, and if he doesn't have any questions, I will end the meeting. But if
Okay.
y'all
Thank
think of, sure enough, see you,
I'm
Barry.
out of here.
See you
All right.
tomorrow.
I'm ready, Jeb. Let me unmute you. I don't know why it's not automatically unmuting you guys. It's supposed to do that. I'm ready. I'm sorry, I still can't hear you. Start over, I'm sorry.
That's okay. This little bit about value added for any firm can be thought of as wages plus rents plus interest plus tax plus profits, but it's different for financial institutions. I was wondering if you could kind of explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
It talks about net interest income. I don't know.
All right. So, you might remember from your macroeconomics that national income is wages plus rents plus interest plus profits. Okay, going back to the idea that a financial institution has all these financial assets on each side of the balance sheet, has financing choices and investment choices.
Mhm.
This is a much more important contribution to the national income of society. That's the thing that makes financial institutions so unique, is the way they generate their cash flows. And whenever this was the kind of thing that people first started talking about for FIs, about how different they were, it got a lot more study than it does now, because something that banks and other financial institutions started doing is they started relying a lot more heavily on fee income.
Mhm.
So as time passes, this is becoming a lot more important to them. But traditionally, this was the thing that was important. So that's why we have a separate class about managing financial institutions. If not, then Finance 301 and Finance 410 would be enough. We could just talk about financial management. But because they're so unique, because of the interest that they rely on, then we have to have a special class to talk about managing them.
So, okay, so interest earned, I mean, that's like, I'm trying to think of an example of just interest, you know, a bank would earn just on a loan, like on a security or something like that.
Yeah, whenever you were doing that ratio analysis, an important number is net interest income. So the financial institutions are investing in all these financial claims, and the cash flow they get from those is the interest that the people borrowing money from the institution are paying. At the same time, the financial institution is borrowing lots of things from other people. So they're receiving interest and they're paying interest. So net interest income is super important for them. You know, Exxon is not receiving a whole lot of interest and paying a whole lot of interest. So we don't care about it. But for Bank of America or for Wells Fargo, we do, because we want to look at the interest coming in and the interest going out. So that paragraph was just setting you up to start thinking about, you know, why do I have to take this damn class? I'm not going to go work for a bank. I'm not going to go work for an insurance company. Well, first of all, you don't know. Most people don't end up where they think they will. That's risk. That's career risk. And secondly, financial institutions are very different.
Mhm.
So part of that first section of material is designed to make you see how different they are.
Right. Yeah, you have the different types of cash flow generation, and then after that, I guess you're just kind of setting it up for why financial institutions are, you know, important and different from other.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Okay, gotcha.
How are you, Misha? Did you have a specific question you wanted to ask?
She's muted.
Okay, she's
No, I'm
unmuted.
good. Sorry I'm late. I was at work. I'm at work, so.
You're not late. You don't have to come at all if you don't want to.
No, I don't have any questions. I probably have more questions tomorrow because I kind of don't have
All right.
much of my stuff with me today, but I just
All
wanted
right.
to sign on anyway, kind of
All right.
listen.
It sounds like you're busy from your email and what you're saying now. So
Yeah.
stay safe. And
I will.
thank you for taking care of folks. It's real important right now.
Yeah.
Finance 500 is a lot less important than it was a month ago. So
Yeah.
no question about that.
Yeah.
All right, Jeb, you got some more?
Let's see. What's a common bond in a credit union?
That is just some kind of a social or business relationship that the customers of that type of financial institution theoretically have to have before they could join.
Mm-hmm.
So here in Shreveport, we got Barksdale Federal Credit Union.
Right.
So supposedly you have to be in the armed services. That would be the common bond. We've also got some Navy federal credit unions here. Kind of redundant, but the fact of the matter is that credit unions are basically just becoming commercial banks. And so the common bond is not nearly as important as it used to be.
Gotcha, yeah. Oh, and also, yeah, you have this little section about other mortgage-related institutions, and you start abbreviating. It says FNMA, GNMA. I'm not sure what those are.
The Federal National Mortgage Association, the Government National Mortgage Association. So
Which
you got Fannie Mae and Ginnie Mae.
Oh.
And then you also have the FHLMC, which for some reason they call Freddie Mac, the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation.
Okay.
You can look. You got a book, right, Jeb?
Yeah, I do. It's
don't neglect your book.
Yeah, it's very lengthy. Their chapters are very long and hard to pay attention when you're reading trying to,
you are such a millennial. Misha, before you start to worry, Jeb is in a different class than you are.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what questions, and I was like, did I miss something? Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's it. When you say the VA, you're talking about Department of Veterans Affairs?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Veterans Administration, I think is what they're called, right?
Oh, okay. So our test on Monday, it's going to be,
it's gonna be a lot like your 301 test, except drawn from a different place. And instead of me putting the same piece of paper down in front of everybody, I'm letting Moodle randomize tests. So I put in a whole bunch of questions into Moodle, and then when you log in to take your test, it's going to pick the right number of points for you.
Okay. So is it open notes or?
Yeah, I think that I have the proctoring tool set.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can have a document out and a spreadsheet out if you choose to do so. You don't have to.
Okay.
And in fact, I tell people, prepare as if you were going to go sit in a room with a piece of paper and you're going to be happier. The more you try to rely on other sources, I think that causes you to study differently. You know how I like things, Jeb. I like to ask a question and for you to show me that you understand the answer. I'm not looking for some Pulitzer Prize winning article as an answer to a question. I'm just answering for you to tell me what you understand about that question.
Okay.
So yeah, you can have a document and a spreadsheet for Finance 420. If Proctorio gives you any trouble, I can fix that later. I've just never used Proctorio before, so I don't know exactly what to expect. If you're taking your test and you open up a Word document, that's okay with me. If Proctorio doesn't like it, they might come in and hassle you. Don't worry about it. If they come in and hassle you, I'm not going to let it screw up your test taking we'll fix it somehow.
Okay. Did you say 10 questions?
I don't remember what I said.
Okay.
I've slept since then.
Is our test gonna, I mean, I know we're in different classes, but
No,
similar setup.
Finance 500 is not proctored.
Okay.
And you
And
guys
10
can,
questions though.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I
think
honestly don't remember.
Okay.
I usually make it out and then forget to tell y'all what it looks like.
Is it kind of similar to the practice one kind of?
Except that all the practice one is math. And I told them earlier, Misha, that most of your tests in Finance 500 are not going to involve math. Most of the questions that you get are not going to be math questions.
Oh, okay.
This is not a math class. Read that document, that reading guide, and look at the concepts and try to get to a place where you feel like you understand those concepts.
Okay.
And if you don't understand them, ask me.
Okay.
Email, forum, chat.
All right, I guess I'm good.
You're great, Jeb.
I know.
I expect you to perform. Well, I better not say this because I am recording this. I know that you are an excellent student. I got no worries. Let me just say it that way.
Thanks. Well, I might hop back in tomorrow if I have any more questions.
All right. Sounds good.
See you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. Burris, you got anything else you want to do? All right. Y'all stay safe.
All right. You too.